Hello, welcome back to Bastionland, and we're back. And these streams have been a learning process. And I think last week I spoke to you about how the lesson learned from stream number 1 was to stay hydrated. And looking back over stream number 2, I've realised that I do nothing but swing this chair back and forth when I'm talking. Especially when I'm rambling on about something where I'm maybe getting carried away. So today, my goal is going to be keeping this chair still. If I was a fancier streamer, I would have a counter for how many times I swing the chair. We're also going to just adjust this camera ever so slightly. So yeah, with that slightly unusual start, I am Chris McDowell, and I'm going to be talking about Electric Bastionland again. So Electric Bastionland, if you're not familiar, you must be familiar if you're one of the 10 people watching this. Altered POV, as usual, a pleasure. If you can do the usual tech update for me and let me know whether the stream is running smoothly, that is always appreciated. But today, like I say, my goals are, I'm already doing it. I'm already swinging the chair. My goals are keep the chair in place. I've got my drinks, and we are going to go through more pages than we have previously, because last week we got through 10 failed careers and a few B-sides. And at this rate, it's going to take a long time, and we're going to have another 8 videos of me talking about failed careers, which might be good for some people, but I would like to get to talking about the other sections of the book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a slightly quicker pace through the failed careers. My strategy for today is to say more with fewer words, and not to just talk quicker, because my other thing that I've noticed is I talk very quick in these things. So I'm going to be a man of few words, but hopefully it's going to be insightful. So as you can see, we have some fancy ass new graphics as well. I don't know, I got the one that was free, and I quite liked that the rainbow pattern made me imagine that I'm inside a ZX Spectrum keyboard. So that's my decision making process there. So let's not mess around. It's 4 minutes past 9 o'clock by my time. I would like, by the time the next hour rolls around, by 10 p.m, I would like to have gotten to, if we can get through 20 failed careers today, then we've doubled our pace from last week, and that's a little bit of a healthier pace. So last week we got onto number 21. The Star Blessed. So as usual, if you've got any questions, comments, throw them in the chat and I'll try and answer them as we go. I'm gonna have a short interval. If I can get to number 31 or 31 by 30:30, we'll take a short break to catch up on the questions, but I will try and answer them as I go. And the thing that I haven't been doing, which, as far as I'm aware, stream is just about self-publicity, but I've not been very good at publicising this stream. If you could share it around, that would be much appreciated. See if you know anyone interested in RPG design, get them in. See how many people we can get on. So, Fizding, thank you for the audio-visual update. So the Star Blessed, we got to this career last week, and I said I had some thoughts about this career. It was one of the first ones that I wrote, because even back in Into the Odd, I had this idea that rather than being gods in the traditional sense, people worship all sorts of things, and one of the common things that people worship is the stars themselves. And in Electric Bastionland, that sort of grew into the idea of the living stars, which is something that I'm going to be talking more about as the next few weeks go on. But here, what I wanted was sort of a cross between that. They're not quite, so there's like what's the word, prodigy, cosmic prodigy or something later on, that's kind of like you're part of a star cult. But Star Blessed The original idea was like a UFO abductee survivor, basically. So you've been abducted by aliens and you've had this experience, but rather than it being the 20th century version that we associate with today, it's changed you in maybe a way that's more like a gift rather than just being a traumatic experience. So Star Blessed, yeah, like I say, the art, I think this might be possibly one of my favourite pieces. This is definitely one of my favourite pieces. It could be my favourite piece of art. And I think it speaks for itself, really. But I think just the combination of the architecture, one of the bits of the brief that I gave Alec was that I liked it when the characters were very small on the page, and it kind of gave this sense of scale, of the world is bigger than them, and they're just a small piece of it. And here you've got that on a kind of extreme scale, where you've got the stars as well as the huge building. And the thing that I particularly like is I just like how much the character stands out against the sort of the black sky. But I like this piece so much that I'm setting up a web store at the moment for physical sales. So if you missed out on the Kickstarter and you want to buy a physical book in the next week or so, I'm just waiting for the go ahead that's ready to launch. But in setting up the web store, I needed to put some images on there. So I had one as a big banner image. I thought, I'm going to have this one because this will look fantastic. And the thing that I didn't think about is the subliminal messaging, where I'm using this for my storefront, and the signpost at the bottom says "Live free, spend now, sale," and there's definitely not going to be a sale on the storefront, not to begin with, anyway. So that's a nice bit of subversive marketing there. Hopefully, it will mean that everyone goes on the website, buys a book. So in terms of the actual content on here, you've got a couple of other little bits that sort of again, I've already spent too long on this bit of career, but we're gonna crack on because some of them are going to be breezing through. But I've got quite a few things to point out about this one. This is one of the most obvious references in the names here: Pollux, Vega, Regala, Hamel. They're all stars, and in terms of let me hide myself for a moment. In the debt holder at the bottom, the Baztuan Order of Vault Keepers. So yeah, you get a bomb. So that's always a nice thing to give the group as a whole to share. But this Baztuan Order, there's sort of like a little bit of a repeating gimmick throughout the book where people spell Bastion differently. The idea being that it's such a large city that people don't even agree on the name. So it usually begins with a B and has the kind of the same structure as the word of Bastion, but here it's the Baztuan Order of Vault Keepers. So maybe they're using like an archaic name for Bastion, but I didn't want to go overboard with that kind of stuff because it gets a little bit indulgent if you go too far. But it's a nice little nod to that idea. And again, we're into oddities territory, the Star Gift, and I think the one that perhaps is the most obvious nod to the idea of being an alien abduction survivor is the saucer burn. So it tingles in the presence of artificial light, and you can will yourself to levitate slowly towards the light. And I don't think I've definitely had this career come up, but I don't think I've had that object come up. And that's the thing with this book. There's so many objects in here. The vast majority of them aren't tested. So you never know. You might be the first person to ever use that item. If you roll up a character and you get one of them, chances are it's not been tested by me. I've definitely had someone have the wild tongue before, where you can talk to any living thing, and that's an idea that I like. This idea that you could talk to a tree, say, or you can talk to a sheep, but their points of reference are going to be so different to yours. You might not be able to have a very meaningful conversation with them, but it creates a bit of a problem for the GM because you've got to get into the mind of a tree and decide what that's like. Anyway, let's move on. Star Blessed is great. I love that one. Unrevolutionary. So this is one that got a bit of a name change quite late on. For a while, it was a barricade sapper or something to that effect, and it felt too mundane, and ordinary, and I think it was one of the ones where I saw people get it a couple of times and be a little bit disappointed in it because it felt a bit dull. And to be honest, this whole career got a bit of a real bit of a tidy up in the edit, because it was just one of these ones that had very mundane items, because it's one of the first ones to not have oddities. So I gave it a real bit of a shine up, and some of the items that you get now do function as kind of minor oddities. So the bottle of nectar brew, it's lightly alcoholic and medium strength glue. A spoiled pet rabbit. This is another example of a big part of the edit was adding just an adjective to things. So I think originally it would have just said pet rabbit, but just saying that it's a spoiled pet rabbit gives you a lot more to go with and a lot more inspiration. And again, the fact that a gum comes with a comical dispenser. And yeah, the bright green parrot. And it was just a case of going through, and I didn't want to go overboard with description, but some things were just too straightforward. And that kind of ties into something that I was thinking about this today, actually, in terms of realism. And you might look at Bastionland and in some sense think it's quite a grounded setting, like it's quite grounded in reality. Like it has its fantastical elements, but it's much more grounded than... There's a lot of sort of everyday concerns that are very similar to our everyday concerns. The fact that you have debt, the fact that you have a failed career. But what I wanted to do was be relatable rather than realistic. So in reality, the idea of somebody's job being to go and clear up after a revolution because they're happening so often, it's not realistic, but it's relatable. It feels close enough to some of the things that we know about, and it fits with some things that we might feel as well. So it's relatable to real life without necessarily having to be realistic. Whereas in some other settings, they might go to great lengths to make sure things are realistic and make sure things make logical sense. So they might say, here's why the world works this way. It's realistic. Look, we thought of everything. We thought about the physics of this, and we looked at the demographics of cities in this sort of time era, and this is a very realistic take on a fantasy city. But also there are wizards and goblins, and yeah, so that's not what I wanted. I wanted things to be more grounded in relatability rather than realism. The human unionist is an interesting one because it's one of the few careers in here that kind of presents an ideology. So it does kind of lead your character into a certain direction. Now, you don't have to agree and say that your character is still adhering to these beliefs. So in this case, the human unionist says, the world is full of strange and powerful things, and none of them deserve our worship. So it's kind of like a extreme atheist, essentially, but an atheist in the Bastionland sense, where yeah, there are things that people worship, and they seem to have a real effect as well. So there are real aliens and there are real machines, and these are things that people might worship. So you might think this is leading you to think your character has to believe in these things still. They have to be anti-machine and anti-alien. But again, remember, this is your past, and that's stressed at the start of the chapter. It says this is your past and it's your starting point. So you can go from here in any direction you want. You could say you completely abandon that. You're a born-again alienist now, or a born-again machinist, or maybe you've decided, let people do what they want. Your humans are rubbish. So that was the idea. But then there are specific little bits in here. So if you look at what made you join the Union, again, it's still phrased as the past, but it does lead you into a certain direction. So it's not quite as open a path as it might originally seem, or rather, you might have to remember that original guidance. Otherwise, you might slip into the trap of thinking, well, I've got to be this human unionist now. So I like the fact that they had a day job as well. It's that kind of Dad's Army, Home Guard feeling where, the human unionists would perhaps get together at the weekends and they'd have a butcher and a baker and a river snake hunter. River snake hunter is an interesting one because it's like your day job is cooler than your failed career. So why are we finding out about you being a human unionist? I want to know more about being a snake hunter. And yeah, I think that's it's an interesting one. It's a very different sort of take to the sort of thing we've had before. Liberal engineer. Now these names, I was looking at these names and I was thinking I can work this out. There must be some reference here because ference is making me think about like iron, like something being ferrous. Piero sounds really familiar. I'm sure I looked up something. So I think these are all references. And geobert, like geo, like stone. So it's making me think it's something to do with like metal or stone. I've got no idea. I can't remember. So yeah, it's a good example of something I've spoken about before, where these weapons that I don't describe really, a duck pistol, and I think I got the idea of the duck pistol from a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay supplement. What was it? It had all sorts of weird firearms in it, and one of them was like a duck pistol. I don't know if it was actually called a duck pistol, but it was like it would fire, had like 4 barrels sort of splayed like a duck's foot, and it would just sort of fire out a blast of shot. And yeah, that's what I was imagining. But if you don't know about that, it's up to you to decide what a duck pistol is. And then again, it's a bit cheap saying that your oddity comes from a recent project that you made, but you can't recreate it because it was a fluke. And one of my favourites on here, is it on this one? No, it's not on this one. We'll come back to it when it comes up. There's a type of bomb that I really like. The crank bomb is a bit fiddly. If I could go back, I don't know. That one feels a little bit. I can imagine somebody getting that and not understanding how it works. But maybe I'm just not giving people enough credit. Maybe it's straightforward. But the idea that you have to sort of charge it and you're rolling the damage ahead of time, so you kind of know how much damage it's going to do before you throw it. It's a weird thing, but the beauty of having this many items is if you've got a dumb idea like that, you can just throw it out there and hope for the best. And if people don't understand it, I would like to think that they would either make a decision of how they think it should work, or just choose another item from the list, basically. Masked Horrorist. This came from the first post that I did about unions, and unions were originally going to be a much bigger part of the setting. They tied into the idea of advancement because you would get weird abilities from joining unions, and a lot of them appear as little references in the book. The blog post is still out there. It's called, I think if you just search for unions on my on bastionland.com, you'll find the post that has, I think, about 12 different unions in there that you could join, and their weird abilities and like rituals they could do. And it was an interesting idea, and they kind of work like mini classes. In fact, what they remind me of now, looking at them, they remind me a little bit of some of the classes in Spire, the Spire RPG. Some of the ones that function, there's like the main classes, but then there's the little extra advantage you can take, which are, it's not a full class, it's just like an extra little set of abilities you can get if you join a certain organisation. And it's a little bit like that. But they were a bit too prescriptive for me, and the ones that I think worked as failed careers, I've put them in. So you've got the Masked Horrorist, and then ones that I felt weren't quite worth a full failed career. If I can hide myself again, you can see I've made it into the debt holder here, the Populads. So the idea with the Populads is you're kind of like you sort of become one with the crowd, if you like, and people just won't remember you. So you can kind of do something and people will remember that somebody did it, but you're kind of part of the amorphous crowd. Oh, now that with the camera off, I'm swinging this chair around so much to get it out of my system. Let me tell you. So yeah, some of them made it into big fail careers, some of them just as little references like that. And the mass horrorist is, but the thing I like about it is it's not explained at all, and that happens a lot in the book, but this one is a really good example of it, I think, because clearly your mask gives you some kind of weird ability. So what's your mask? If you get, say, the iron snake saying you can eat a living thing whole and you learn all that it has seen, the fact that it doesn't explain how that works. Is it literally your mask? Is it a physical object? Is it more abstract? Your mask is just like your identity. I don't know. That's up to you. Got to work it out. And the thing that I like about it, and I think when I've had this once before, let me think, what did they get? They had, I think they had the famine machine, a player in a game that I was in. So you can eat metal in place of food. And the thing that it had for the second table, what happens when you take the mask off? Originally, there were some more silly ones here, but they got the one where you had to wear glasses. So I like the idea that this character's taking off this sort of super cool, terrifying mask, and then they're just like putting on these glasses afterwards. It's not a Superman reference, believe it or not, but I kind of like it that they've got this sort of secret identity, if you like. And yeah, I like this one a lot. And speaking of Spire, this one feels very Spire, actually. I think this sort of thing would fit in there quite nicely. So listen, TCH0M, give me a clue. But to come, my wife rolled an iron snake mask. The highlight of the character so far was swallowing a meerkat and discovering a secret laboratory under a zoo. Swallowing a meerkat, that's... See, I was imagining like mice or bugs. But a meerkat, that's some serious going. So there we go. See, we're making okay time, but we're currently pacing about 5 minutes per career, so I'm gonna step it up. Although I do like this one a lot. The Rollicker Club alumni. This came from a blog post that I did that had a borough. Oh, can't remember its name. It had a completely. No, it had a name. It was something like based on like the idea of like a very posh English village. So it was like Chippingley, Swatham or something. It had like a stupid name. And it was like a little bit of kind of English village upper class area right in the middle of Bastion. And the Rollicker Club was in there, maybe under a different name. But they just... Oh, no, it wasn't. It was that they had rollicking sticks. And rollicking is just a good word. Like, I put it in and I sort of thought... I assumed that it made sense to everyone. Like, if you give someone a good rollicking, you're, like, telling them off. You're shouting at them. So, like, a rollicking stick, I imagine, is used to shout at someone while you're hitting them with a stick. And that extended onto the Rollicker Club alumni. The names here they must be something. Oh, right, yeah, okay. So, this is... I think these are... based on British politicians that went to Eton School. Let me think. So Pfeffel is based on one of Boris Johnson's many names, De Pfeffel Johnson or something. Godiva, maybe based on like Gideon Osborne. I'd have thought there'd be a David Cameron reference on here, but I can't see it. Willand, Rokerd, no, I'm not sure. But yeah, I think these are based on politicians that went to the same posh school. And yeah, you want to talk about redundancy? I do occasionally allow myself to just fill out the page with text. The fact that you always get a set of unread textbooks, and it's just one word that's different, If I did that a lot, I might have got in a bit of trouble, but I think I get away with it here. And yeah, we're now into the failed careers where you don't really get a big crazy oddity. Instead, you're getting some stuff you've got to make the best of. So without looking, let's say that I've rolled one with 1 hit point and £5. So I would have a set of unread medicine textbooks. So I don't have any medical knowledge, presumably, unless I decide to sit and learn it. And 1 HP, I'm really good at pratfalls, so I can fall up to 20 feet without any harm. I think that's pretty useful, actually. I could find use for that. The obvious reference here is for 4 hit points. You don't remember what you spent your time doing, so you get a pig dressed in club colours. Obviously a Simpsons reference there of kidnapping a pig from a rival college. And the bottle of ether is something that does come up more than you might think. And again, it creates situations. You can just knock somebody out. It creates interesting situations. Now, the backward legionnaire was simplified in the first for until right near the end, actually. It was called something to the effect of the backward legionnaire. It was the same meaning, but it was spelt in a way that was meant to look like it was written in like an old form of the language. So like legionnaire was like Lejiun something. And it was obviously, the implication was that they're so regressive and so anti-progress that they're using an old form of language, but it didn't translate. It's hard to get that sort of stuff right. And what happened is, in reality, someone would get it and they'd say like, "Oh, I'm a backward legend," and then you'd say, "Oh no, it means backward legionnaire." So I thought, forget it. I'll just call it what it is. And again, we're seeing references here to the unions, the fly heralds. They were in that unions post, but didn't quite make it into a failed career. And again, this is another one that got lots of stuff was added in the edit. So I really remember adding some bits here. So the fact that the javelins, it was just 3 javelins previously, was your obsolete weapon. But the fact that you've named them all, that was added in. And the sling with antique stones, it was added on that they were antique stones. And it might not sound like anything, but you might find a situation where the fact that you own some antique stones comes in useful. And the other thing I like is you're not just wearing old-fashioned clothes, you're wearing unmodern clothes. So it's like aggressively anti-modern. It's not just that you're wearing old clothes, you're going against everything that modernity stands for. And again, I said about the human unionist, how I felt a bit uncomfortable slightly giving this person, presenting a kind of ideology that you sort of have to stick to. So if you decided to abandon the backward legion, then yeah, you can. There's nothing stopping you doing it. But somehow this one feels more fun. It feels more desirable to be a member of the backward legion than the human union. Human unionists just sound like they want to stop other people, having fun. So these sound a lot more appealing. I do think I've gone slightly too far on some of these obsolete items. I think having £10 in stone coins is good. A loot, that's fine, but and the sundial, I've had somebody get the sundial. I don't think they ever found use for it. The chariot with nothing to draw it, I don't know. I think that's too silly, perhaps. I'd be interested to know if anyone gets that, what do they do with it? But again, if I ever found myself doing something like that, I thought if I put it on 6 HP, that's probably fine. Because when someone rolls 6 HP, they're probably thinking, oh, right, okay, what do I get? Am I getting something bad as a punishment for rolling so well? Contract Castaway. Now, I believe these names are all based on famous castaways. But I do not remember them. I had to go to Wikipedia to get a lot of my information here. So if you're an expert on historical castaways or castaways from literature, have a go. Corgi Fan 2, a chariot is just a big wheelbarrow. Yeah, you know what? I'd probably say, because I'm imagining a chariot that's like too heavy to pull, but I would probably say that they can probably push it or carry it. Let's say it's a nice, modest-sized chariot. So there is a completely lame pun in here, but it has to be in there. In the debt holders, the Holy Carcass Sons. Yeah, Carcassonne. A reference to both the town and the board game. So again, this is another one that's kind of a kick in the teeth, this failed career. It's, when you look at the picture, you probably know you're in for a rough ride. And we're not in the territory of what was it called? The liberal engineer or the curiosity collector, or all these people that are getting cool stuff. Nope, you're getting some walking stick and a net. That's pretty good by some of the later standards, and the pack of gum is always appreciated. But yeah, the one that I really, really want to see happen is the lifetime supply of dog food, and that got in there quite early on. Or I think it was relatively early on. I added that in as an item that I wanted somebody to get, and the fact that this is what you get for living on a rock for a number of years is, so presumably you did it on behalf of some kind of dog food company that now owns this island. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I don't know if I'd be happy if I was a player, but who said games are about making people happy? No. Gives you something to go and complain about on Twitter. But saying that, you do get an oddity. Yeah, I was too focused on the dog food. You get something cool. Crystal ball. Yes or no question. I love giving players things like that. I'm surprised I don't see it more often in games. Just the ability to ask the GM a question and say, look, is this guy trying to screw us over? Or is the treasure actually in this vault that we're trying to get to? And they can just say no. And if your game is so reliant on one secret that ruining that ruins the game, then that's on you. Yeah, badly stitched doll. I had to change this because I had two of the same item. The sort of traditional voodoo doll. A doll that you could stick pins in to cause pain to somebody. It was in there twice because when you're trying to fill in 1,200 items on 200 tables, you start to find yourself going over the same ideas a few times. Repressed psychic. It's in your head. You can't hold it any longer. Clear let it go reference. Ural, Marlake, Joris, France, and these must be something to do with famous psychics. Ural must be Uri Geller. The other ones I don't know. Again, I'd have had to research this. If you ask me about famous people that claim to have psychic abilities, Uri Geller is the one that I go to, and after that I'm relatively low on ideas. So again, it's interesting having some that come with an innate ability, and that's something I wanted to stress, that oddities can be something about you. You can be an oddity. So being faintly magnetic was something you could get into the odd, and something I saw a few times, and something that people seem to like. They felt that was quite indicative of the sort of thing that you get in this world. Like, yeah, you're faintly magnetic, work it out. But the one that I had to rewrite it so many times is the 4 HP one, which I'll let you read. Originally, I wanted this to be the idea that you can predict like matters of chance, like a dice roll or drawing a card. So your psychic ability is kind of limited to something in theory, useless. But you could say, right, I'm going to roll this die, and I'm going to get a 6, and you roll it, 6. Very useful if you're playing Electric Bastionland, but I thought I'll put this in as a silly little thing. And then when we were doing the edit, there wasn't much balance work going on, but I think my partner Sarah, who was doing the editing and the proofreading, she said to me, like, if you can do this, if you know which card's going to come out of the deck, so can you just go to like a casino and make your £10,000 back in one night? And I thought, right, okay, yeah, let's tone it down a bit. So I said, okay, well, let's make it just coin tosses. And then we had to limit it again. So it's only coin tosses that other people make. So if you can convince someone to say, okay, you flip a coin and we'll bet money on it, then yeah, you can go ahead and you can scam them out of a lot of money. But it's a coin toss, so it's always 50-50, so you're not going to be able to win £10,000 that easily. And if you do scam someone out of £10,000 and they find out that you can predict these things, you've made a nice enemy for the future. Mendicant myologist. So this is another one where the concept was suggested by a Kickstarter backer. This was Eamon Mulholland, and the idea for this one, I believe there was some inspiration from Fungi of the Far Realms. Again, I'm not going to speak for Eamon much on this because, to be honest, Eamon came to me. I asked when people pledged at this level, and I said, right, okay, so I'll write you a career. You tell me a concept. Give me some names for your sample names if you want to put some references in there. And if there's any particular items you want me to try and work into it, let me know, but then I'll write it up. And then Eamon came and just wrote the whole thing, basically. So I did change a few things, but very little, to be honest. So I feel a little bit bad because he's basically written a failed career for me. I feel like I should be paying him rather than him paying me for this one. But yeah, I was really happy with it when it came in, and I think he really got the concept of failed careers. And I think I just had to tidy up like a little bit of some of the mechanics. But I just love the fact that the mushrooms are all very easy to grasp. And they sort of do interesting things, but they're not too complicated. And again, artwork is great. Good use of the yellow here by Alec. I haven't done my usual praising of Alec. I've seen that he's working on, just minutes before I came on the stream, I saw that he's working on a project with Emmy Allen. So we're getting Bastionland alumni working together on projects. So he's going to be working on a re-release, I guess, enhanced edition of Stygian Library Dungeon. And it looks pretty good. Seems like a good combination, Emmy and Alec. And there we go. We're up to number 30 in 40 minutes. So we're going to have literally just a 2-minute breather. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to talk about the amateur amputator. As you can see, you've got a chatterbox now to contend with. So if you've got any questions, get them in. And when I come back, I will see if I can answer any of the questions. But we'll just be 5 minutes. Okay, so we're back. So Ariachair asks, if a player rolls the good dog background, would you expect them to communicate only in woofs and growls? I would expect the character to. So I wouldn't expect them to say, yes, well, my dog says such and such. You could ask them to do that. I think that's a step beyond the level of humiliation I would be wanting to put on my players. But yeah, as long as they're describing the dog communicating as a dog would, because we will get to it eventually. But as it stresses, you are smarter than many people, but you are still a dog. Yeah, fizzing. You just have to hope somebody else speaks dog. Yeah, I mean, you could go for the whole sort of Chewbacca and Han Solo situation, where maybe one of the players agrees that they've got a bit of a what was the dog? What's the dog called? A bit of a lassie situation where they can kind of understand what's going on just from their barks. So let's get back to it. We did the 10 in 45 minutes. Let's see if I can get to number 40. I'm going to speed up a little bit because if I can get to number 40, we're doing great by the time the hour is up. Amateur Amputator. This was one of the first pieces that Alec got over to me. And I know I've said this a lot, but genuinely I think this might have been the first completed piece that he sent. And it sums up everything about what I liked about the art, because it was very different than what I anticipated. I had an image in my head of an amateur amputator, and I imagined someone kind of quite gross looking with like a bone saw in one hand, kind of like looking quite kind of skeevy and in an alleyway, looking like they're about to saw someone's leg off, and maybe they're looking a bit kind of like almost like they're doing it for the joy of it. But what he's got here is someone that looks a lot more apprehensive. Maybe this wasn't the job that she chose, and she's a lot more glamorous than I expected this career to look. And when I think about it, I actually really like that about what he's done. And I don't know if this was deliberate or not, but I feel like all of the there's a lot of characters that are very fashionable, even people that aren't working in fashionable jobs. Everybody seems to want to present a style. So we've got here, she's looking with, the big hair and everything, but I mean, even if you go back to the ones that we've had, the myologist is wearing some ridiculous hat. Not so much here. Obviously the backward legionnaire, hats again, his hats all the way down. People are just very well dressed in Bastion. People want to make a statement. Even the people in the background, you got top hats. People are putting thought into what they're wearing from the looks of it and how they're styling their hair. And it might just be that Alec wanted to draw. He didn't want to draw a load of ugly people, maybe. But I just like that they got style. There's not just one style. There's not one look for people in Bastionland. And she's got something going on outside of her career. She's not just an amputator. Oh, and Deb World Killer let me hide myself, as the debt holder. I can't remember when this came up with this name. It almost got taken out the edit because I'm like, Deb World Killer, and you owe her money from a cult membership you don't remember agreeing to. And I thought, is that too silly a name? But the fact that I had to ask that means it's stayed. It's still there. The Investment Centurion was another Kickstarter backer who pledged a higher level. Got Matt Wang here, and he came back to me, and I won't go into all the personal details, but I said, this could be based on a career that you've had in the past or a career that you've always wanted to do. And he came back to me with like a list of careers that he's had, and the guy's got a fantastic career behind him, really interesting jobs. So I was sort of spoiled for choice. I was like, wow, you've got all these interesting careers, but we sort of eventually settled on something around the idea of like an investment banker. And in fact, I think it was more to do with like being a manager or like a director of a company. So the idea of like an executive was something I hadn't done yet, and it's something that might have originally felt a little bit too modern, like a little bit too cyberpunk. And certainly the image here, it looks like something out of a cyberpunk book, but I like that. I like that it does bump up against cyberpunk in certain areas. Like, obviously there's no internet. I've said that there are rudimentary computers. I've said that there are machines in the underground that connect everything. There's kind of an internet. The underground is kind of an internet in itself. But I like that this looks like it could have come out of a cyberpunk book. In fact, I saw somebody, I think it was on Twitter, somebody was talking about Electric Bastionland. They posted the front cover of the book saying, oh yeah, my book's arrived, I've got it here. And they said, oh yeah, it's set in this cool cyberpunk setting. And I was like, oh, okay. So someone's interpreted this as cyberpunk, and that's not a bad thing. It's not an invalid thing to say, but it's not what I would have described it as. And I love that it sort of means different things to different people. So yeah, the oddities here, they were really fun to write. Like, writing these careers, I was worried that it was going to feel like a chore because I'd already written the rest of the book. I was just waiting for this extra content to come in, and then I just needed to write that as the last bit of the book. And I thought, it's going to feel like a chore. It's going to feel like I'm obliged to write these. It's going to be a real struggle. But they were all pretty much, in fact, I think all of them were enjoyable to write on some level. But this one especially, it really felt like something that should have been in there anyway. And I was like, when I was writing it, I was like, yeah, this doesn't feel like an add-on. This doesn't feel like a B-side. This feels like it should be one of the careers. And yeah, it obviously the oddities are based on things that you might find on an executive desk. And yeah, word a day calendar. Somebody asked about the drinker bird, I think on the Discord, because it's that little thing that again, so much of this is from The Simpsons. I don't know why this came back to me. The little sort of toy of a bird that would bob up and down drinking the water. So here it drinks the water, and you can ask it to dispense it at the specified temperature. And somebody asked, well, could I just ask for it to be at like a supernova temperature and destroy the whole planet? And I don't want to write rules that prevent things like that. I think the referee will hopefully be able to give you the answer to that question. Cool. Polar Bounty Hunter. This one was just like, I did want a few careers to feel like you're a bit of a badass. Like, if everybody was lame, and I don't mean, you can be lame and still be interesting. And you can even be like lame and powerful, weirdly, but like it's in the like the cool factor. And this isn't a pun. The fact that it's the Polar Bounty Hunter, I wanted to have a few careers in there, like the Masked Horrorist is a good example. Ones that were just outright cool, because then when you've got the Polar Bounty Hunter and somebody else is the gutter minder, it's a nice contrast. The names here: Beagle, the ship that went off on a voyage somewhere. Yeah, there's some reference here, but this one, yeah, was meant to be a cool feeling character. So, just how tough are you, and what power did you get from the mist? And you know, this is the fact that you've got like these ones that have like almost quite typical fantasy names. It's the contrast against other things that I like here. So you've got someone who's very mundane, and then you've got this character, and it might be that they've come back from the polar wastes, and they've got a huge wolf as their companion, and they've got this ice clap where they can clap and extinguish flames, and it's like, whoa, this guy's cool. Like, how did you get this one? And I ended up with a street snooker player. Although I do love the street snooker player. I'd take the street snooker player. Necro engineer Justin Hamilton came up with this concept, and again, it felt right because you've got a city the size of Bastion. I did already have the corpse collector, who was kind of responsible for like moving corpses around, but then what happens after that? So it answers a question, but it doesn't provide a definitive answer. And again, I like that they've got style. They're not They're not just a person wearing boring clothes because they work with corpses. No, they're making the effort. So this was another one that where are we? Yeah, the great final project. I like careers that give you a little hook, because people often ask, what happens when you paid your debt and you've paid off your 10,000 and you're free? You're like, is the game over? And I say, well, if you want the game to be over, then yeah, that can be it, and you can go and play something else. But if you're thinking, well, we still want to play Electric Bastionland, by this point I would have thought the players would have at least built up some sort of hooks, made some enemies, or made some friends they want to protect, or seen some things that they actually want to buy with their own money. And I like this one. You could have maybe, well, you couldn't get funding for your great project that was going to save the city from its corpse disposal issues. But yeah, maybe now you're going to go off and get the money to do it yourself. And then here we go, mockery. So the names are obvious Muppet references. Tremor? What's Tremor? I have no idea. I don't know. Well, Poggy seems to be like Piggy, Drench It like Kermit. Pseudo and Tremor, I don't know. There's probably another reference there that's completely lost on me. But the mockeries, I've spoken about them before, and I'll speak about them when we get to the mockery section of the book. But the thing that I tried to do here was, when you get your mock animal type, so if you're a mock fox, you also get something that humanizes you. So even if you don't know much about mockery, don't know anything about mockeries, you should get this failed career and you should get what's going on. So you're a mock fox and you're wearing a jacket. So it tells you that you're civilized, at least enough to wear a leather jacket, and but you're still kind of an animal. So yeah, alpha tester Eric Dalehite came up with the concept for this one, and it really wrote itself. And yes, you can see by the length of it, I've sort of got carried away with it here. I really can't remember. Oh, you know what? I'm forgetting how much of this was by Eric Dale. I think he did actually come up with a concept for these 6 items, and maybe I just tidied them up. Yeah, we'll give him the credit. But I like them a lot. I like the mechanical dog substitute. Yeah, I got a feeling that these were mostly written by him. Prize Breeder, again, I've spoken about this artwork before. It was one of the first ones that came through. It's one of my favourites. It was right at the centre of the Kickstarter for a reason. I think it tells you something about the world that you don't get with other games. I don't think of another game where somebody gets two crocodiles as pets, or 2 ferrets, or 2 tiny goats. No, I think this was one I was really happy with, and I thought this is a real point of difference class. You're not going to get this in D&D or Call of Cthulhu or Pathfinder, or even in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or things like that. Elliot Wells says, you probably describe it as Deco Punk. Yeah, I mean, I think the Art Deco thing is definitely key. I sort of said to Alec, I think when we were working over the style, I was like, yeah, don't go like fully Art Deco, and he's not. There's some of the geometric stuff that kind of fits. I wanted some like Art Nouveau as well, so let me see if I can find an example. I'm by no means a design expert, but I think even if it's not deliberately part of the architecture, the fact that you've got like lots of natural forms kind of suggests Art Deco being in there with it. Sorry, Art Nouveau, the natural forms. Failed Citizen. I love this piece of art, and I know Alec was very happy with this. I'm sure he won't mind me saying. But this whole like sort of hourglass reflected city in the sky, he came up with that as an idea when I'd said to him about, like, you know, the stars are kind of part of the setting, so make sure the stars are sort of featured. And he said, like, well, how about this idea of the sort of the city reflecting down from the stars? And I did like it a lot as visually, and it appears here and I think in one other place, but I wanted it to be just something that appears occasionally, and it's not explained, and it's not like the normal, like you wouldn't expect to always look in the sky and see these. And I'm not even going to try and explain it now. It is just a cool visual thing. Maybe it is just like a reflection of the city that occasionally happens in the sky. Maybe it's some kind of influence from the stars. Who knows? The names here, I do remember them. I'm going to create some enemies, because this is a vicious stab at a city that I have previously worked in and lived near. So Burnham, Tunner, Longan and Fenson are based on Burslem, Tunstall, Longton and Fenton, which are 4 of the towns that make up the wonderful city of Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire in the UK. And I'm not saying that Stoke-on-Trent is a failed city, but I worked there and it's a challenging place to be at times, and I think I've got a lot of affection for Stoke, but I grew up in small towns, so I think I can the whole point of Deep Country was meant to be, it was being presented as the way that it's like a stereotype of a stereotype. So it's how I would imagine if I lived in the country. It's how I imagine people in London imagine the countryside is like. So it's like it's like 2 steps removed from reality. It's not just what people in London think, it's what people in the country think people in London think the country is like. So yeah, having Stoke be referenced as a failed city is kind of it's a loving reference, if you like. And yeah, it's a little bit of world building as well, because it's telling you that there are failed cities out there. And originally they were in there a bit more as a bit more of a solid part of the setting, but I left it a bit. I think that they are referenced in the Deep Country section, but I've left it open, very open for you to come up with your own cities. But the key thing is that they are failed. Urban Safarist. So, this piece of art, whenever I look at it, I hope I'm not giving too much away here, but this is based on a very, very early piece of concept art that Alex sent me. I think the background is almost identical to the original piece, and obviously it's all been tidied up and filled in with details. But it was one of the first. I said earlier that the amateur amputator was the first piece that he sent me, but this is before we even had any specific careers. I was like, just draw some stuff and send me some concept art and see if it fits the kind of style. And yeah, the gas mask wearing person, it's quite an ineffective gas mask, because you can see their mouth underneath, and this kind of railway bridge here. I've said it lots of times on these streams, but it was this sort of thing that made me realise that Alec really got the setting and was really getting a vision for it. So yeah, the idea that people in Bastion, they don't go on safari because, well, I'm not ruling anything out. I'm sure there are parks large enough to act as safari parks, but instead, maybe it's more common to go on an urban safari because there's nature everywhere. So if you want to go see some lions, this person might know where there are some lions, but it's also about the human condition. So rich people might go to a slum area of Bastion and they go on like a guided tour, the kind of poverty tourism, if you like. Lockholder. I said earlier that wherever possible I tried to make the names gender neutral, so originally this was Locklord / Locklady. Dead Shoresman is an omission that I really should have fixed. But yeah, the Lockholder, again, I tried to make as many references to canals as I could because it just feels very fitting for the setting. Severin Cisterns Underground Cruises. Let's make it so you can see this. That was a little blog post that I wrote for a little adventure based around, it's kind of based on the idea of like the Disney World Jungle Cruise, but somebody being run by a sort of shady guy that takes you on a boat to take you on like a tour of the underground canals, and there's like bad props set up around to try and scare you. But in the adventure, obviously, things go awry, and some of the things turn out to be real. Spoilers. But yeah, that's a nice little sort of quick mini adventure if you want it. It's on the blog. And again, the unions here. These weren't. Yeah, these were based on. Again, they were based on a blog post, but I think it was different to the other unions. These were orders. I had orders and unions, and I can't remember which one was which. But yeah, it kind of fits in with the idea of some of the gang names that I had earlier, where I just like coming up with a silly name and giving them a gimmick. So the fact that the Lockkeepers Union was called the new Sonic Dogs, like it just says they call themselves a Lockkeepers Union, but it's clearly like a gang that are like taking ownership of this lock and charging tax for people to go through. I like the Wrist Watchmen. It's lame. I remember using them as like as sort of antagonists on an adventure a while back, and they were just these inept guards that had these watches that would like fire ineffective weapons. And I think one of the most memorable things you can do to your players is to make them feel supremely guilty. And I remember our players feeling awful because they killed one of these Wrist Watchmen, and then the other one had like surrendered, and they took his watch, and his watch meant everything to him. And it was just, yeah, I laid it on real thick and made them feel bad. It's fun. Urban Apes took your lock, but you get a small chimp. I'm happy with that. Repurposed Augmental. Of all the ones that looked different to how I imagined it, this one is definitely different to how I imagined it, because in my head it was more like a kind of cyborg type character, whereas here it's a lot more weirdly like organic, mechanical kind of thing. And yeah, there's some pretty bold choices going on here with like the typefaces and the projected text. But I like it. This is one that people often point to and say, yeah, the art looks great, I love this one. So I like having these occasional just splashes of yellow, because I think it's, you'll go through a number of pages before you get to that splash of yellow, and I did want them to be splashes. I didn't want every page to be yellow and black. So yeah, there should be like a drinking game on here where when I reveal that something is a Red Dwarf reference. So I think there must be a Red Dwarf reference here. I guess the chest compartment, possibly. Yeah. Noble in Waiting. This was mostly an excuse to come up with silly names for the titles. So the titles that you're due to inherit, you might be next in line. Well, no, you're not next in line, sorry. You might be a number of people in line to things like the Metagon of Ram, or the Foreigner of Trave, or the Crypta of Hyde. And it's nice little word building. It tells you there's a place. I always assume I'm in Deep Country. There's a place waiting for you. There's a family there that you can call upon potentially. It's different to the disinherited socialite, because there's no real suggestion that you have any issues with your family. So you may still be able to use them as a resource. And it's the names are meant to suggest a more kind of medieval society. So I always imagine you come from far out in Deep Country. And, the fur cloak will help with that. Vault Cracker. Again, this art, this splash of yellow is bold, and I like that he's making the effort. He's got the style going on. So the thing that I didn't notice here is what he has on his belt, which is the key flute. A 1 in 6 chance of opening any lock you play to. If it fails once, it never works on that lock. So that's like a really lame. It's I find that funny, and I've had someone get that item and they thought it was funny, and they quite enjoyed going to each lock and being like, oh, hang on, and it wouldn't work obviously most of the time. But it's essentially the lock picking mechanic from basic D&D, where you've got like a 1 in 6 chance of picking a lock. So oh no, I'm getting muddled up because I think lockpicking may have been a percentage. I'm not down on all the different versions of early D&D, but certainly things like kicking down doors and listening at doors was based on a chance of a certain number of chances within 6, so 1 in 6, 2 in 6. So this is a little bit of a nod to that idea, but related to opening the lock instead. Acupressurist of Inanimate Objects, written by ZXU. And when I got Zedek on board, I love a lot of the stuff that I've seen Zedek writing. And I said, like, go crazy, but let me know what your idea is ahead of time, just in case there's something that's a bit too similar already in there, or if one of the other guest writers is doing something the same. And when Zedek came back to me with, I can't remember if this was the only idea. I think there was a number of ideas, but one of them was definitely this Acupressurist of Inanimate Objects. And I don't think I outright said, like, yes, do that one, but I was like, oh, that one would be cool. Do that. If you do that one, that'd be really cool. So I'm really glad that it came through, because it's, I mean, just the artwork, like the fact that she's got all these pins in objects throughout the room, it's just a cool concept, and it's not something that I would have thought of. And that's what I wanted from these sort of guest written failed careers. I wanted fresh ideas, because as we've discovered, I've not got that many ideas. It turns out I repeat myself a lot. So it's cool to get somebody else in, and it's always cool when you get something that feels like I could kind of, looking over it, I'm like, I might have guessed maybe this was ZX based on the people that wrote, but it still fits in. If you removed that written by ZXU credit, and if you're reading through the book, you might not think twice about this. You might think, yeah, this fits with the other careers. So we are at just over an hour, and we've done 20 failed careers, I think. Yeah, we'll leave. No, you know what? Let's do number 40A and 40B, and then we'll start at 41. Just to round out the decades. So revolutionary duelist is one of the most common careers based on the percentages. So I've seen it quite a few times. I like that you get a weird weapon, and I like that you get a cool ability to use. But it's immediately setting people's expectations that you're not going to get a weapon that's you're not going to get a special ability that's like just a cleave that lets you do extra damage in an area. It's going to be a little bit weird. I love the fact that you can throw your weapon for D8 damage. That combined with the bow is an interesting idea. The idea that you can throw the bow for more damage than you actually using it for its real purpose. And again, there's more things to do with just not explaining too much. So a fixed rifle is just a bayonet that doesn't. It's a gun with a bayonet that doesn't work as a gun. And lastly, the Expelled Lamplighter, written by Zachary Cox. So Zach was one of the extremely dedicated people that both pledged enough on the Kickstarter to have me write a failed career, and also I asked to come and write a failed career themselves. So he's in there as both a writer and as a guest concept person. So I love the artwork again. I think when I spoke to John Harper on the audio commentaries for this, this kind of feels like it could fit in Blades in the Dark almost. But I like that it tells you it's building the world. It's laying down hooks for the Lanterner's code and what that means. So I think we will leave it there. Let's get a teaser. Newspaper intern for next week I will be starting on. And I'm not going to talk about it now, but I can see a little bit of what I was talking about with the Art Nouveau here, if you look there, so we can finally see what's going on with that. So, if you do have any last questions, I don't think the stream is too far behind today. Every time the stream seems to get a little bit more stable each time. I don't know if it's fewer viewers. We're getting fewer viewers every time. We need to sort this out, guys. But maybe, yeah, if you're quick, I might have time for one more question. But while I've got you here, I can give you a little bit of an update as to what's going on with Bastionland at the moment. So, your printed copies, if you ordered them, most people in the UK now have received them. I heard one arrived in Germany today. Today being the 5th of May. So if you're in mainland Europe, hopefully you're going to be getting yours pretty soon. I've not heard of any getting their way to America yet. I know that they were distributed. They were sent out at the end of last week, the international ones to America, and the rest of the world. So yeah, I appreciate your patience, and when you do get them, be sure to let me know. And the other thing is, I'm going to give a little bit of a push to, let me make sure I'm phrasing this correctly. If you know anybody who would like the book but hasn't ordered it on Kickstarter, the storefront will be going live pretty soon. So when I do announce that it's live, anybody that you know who's admiring the book, send it their way and see if we can clear out the rest of the books. That'd be pretty cool. I am... Oh yeah, so Shame81 still waiting in Belgium. Well, I mean, if Germany arrived today, Belgium should be pretty close, you would think. And yeah, the question. I have a general game question. How many sessions/expeditions do your tables normally need to get to the 10k debt paid off, if ever? So there's actually a guideline to this later on in the book. Should we skip ahead? Yeah, let's go ahead. There's a guide to treasure later on. Oh, this is going to take too long. Let me get to the right point. There's basically a guide for how much treasure to put in the dungeon, and it's, as you might expect, it's quite a loose guide. And I'll go over it fully when we get to it, but for now at least, let me hide myself so you can see it. Right at the start of preparing the game, I've got a guideline to the treasure here. So if you think it's something they get in one session, maybe £1,000, and if it's going to take more than one session to get, make it worth £10,000. So yeah, that's not. It's a pretty broad set of guidelines there, but the main thing is also there is aside from the main treasure, there are other lesser pieces worth about a tenth of the main treasure's value. To be honest, I tend to go a little bit over this because I tend to run short campaigns or one shots, so I would probably have like the total amount of treasure in the site be maybe £5,000 if they get everything. So yeah, it's really up to you. I in terms of my table, I tend to run, like I say, at most like 3 or 4 session long campaigns, and much more likely than that I run one shots, just because that's the way that my games tend to wind up. I'm always either testing something new or playing with a new group, so I don't have a sort of an ongoing campaign of this, if you get what I mean. So yeah, that's the guidelines in terms of treasure. The other bit of behind the scenes stuff. No, I'm not going to go too far behind the scenes. There's going to be an email going out with some updates if you back the Kickstarter, and I'll probably put something similar on Twitter. So I'm hoping to be able to talk about some new upcoming things in the next few weeks. The main things at the moment are streaming a game. So it's the number one request I get is, where can I actually see this game being played? Is there an actual play of it anywhere? And I just need to work it out. As you can see, I'm getting to grips with Streamlabs. We've got like boxes, frames. We've got a chat box. It's better than it was previously, but I need to just work out how best to make it all look appealing for running a game. So that's going to be the next thing on the horizon. After that, I'm still working on a number of small games. Occasionally people ask me about some game that I posted a little teaser of a while back, but there are very few of my games that are completely abandoned. So Void Heist, which will probably get a name change, is my kind of sci-fi heist game, sort of very, very loosely based on the core of Blades in the Dark, but a vastly simplified version. That's on the back burner for now. I'm dabbling a lot with stuff to do with 2 players and no GM, and that's something that I'm hoping, if it works out, could be a big part of some future plans that I've got. That would be very cool. Like I say, something involving the Living Stars maybe in the future. And the other thing that I'm working on is I've got a few older games that I'm tidying up for either to just like throw out there for free, but like get them to a point where I'm no longer ashamed of them. A couple of them might be closer to like print and play sort of games, like mini board games rather than a role-playing game. But yeah, there's lots going on. So stay up to date on the blog. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm going to leave the stream running for a little bit just so that we can so that I don't cut off the end as usual. But as ever, I'll be back next week, 9 p.m. BST, and I will see you then.